Tonight, I want to begin with a simple idea. Wars do not collapse all at once. They unravel, right? They unravel quietly, in meetings where no one disagrees, in reports where bad news is softened, in briefings where reality is edited, in decisions made on incomplete information. And by the time failure becomes visible, it is already embedded in the system. That is what happened in Russia's war against Ukraine. This conflict did not fail because of one mistake. It failed because of many small distortions that accumulated inside a political structure that had stopped correcting itself. When Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion, he believed he was acting from a position of strength. He believed Russia had restored its military power, secured its economic base, and neutralized internal opposition. He believed the West was divided and hesitant. He believed Ukraine was unstable and vulnerable. These beliefs were not tested, they were reinforced. Over years, Russia's political system had narrowed. Independent institutions weakened, media centralized, civil society constrained, intelligence agencies politicized, dissent criminalized, information stopped flowing freely. And when information stops flowing, leaders stop learning. Inside the Kremlin, assessments increasingly reflected what leadership wanted to hear rather than what reality demanded. Ukraine was described as fragmented. Its government was portrayed as illegitimate. Its military was dismissed as ineffective. Its population was assumed to be passive. These narratives were repeated so often that they became internal truth. Strategy was built on them. The invasion plan reflected confidence rather than caution. Rapid advances, minimal reserves, limited logistical buffers, high-risk airborne operations, assumptions of quick political collapse. This was not preparation for prolonged war, it was preparation for theater. When Russian forces crossed the border, they encountered something unexpected. Resistance, not symbolic resistance. Organized resistance, institutional resistance, civil resistance. Ukraine's state apparatus did not disintegrate, its military did not fragment, its leadership did not flee, its society did not surrender. Instead, the invasion triggered consolidation, command structures tightened, civil defense networks activated, local governments coordinated, volunteers mobilized, information flowed rapidly. The country reorganized itself under fire. Russia's strategy depended on shock. Ukraine absorbed it. That absorption broke the invasion's logic. Without political collapse, the war became military, and Russia was not optimized for sustained modern warfare. The first systemic failure was logistics. Supply chains were fragile, fuel deliveries lagged, maintenance capacity was insufficient, spare parts were scarce. Food distribution faltered. Ukrainian forces quickly identified this weakness. Rather than focusing on tanks, they targeted trucks. Rather than attacking fronts, they disrupted rear lines. Rather than confronting mass, they isolated units. Mechanized columns became stranded. Equipment was abandoned. Momentum disappeared. Then came communication failures. Russian units often lacked secure networks. They relied on vulnerable systems. Orders were delayed. Coordination broke down. Intelligence was incomplete. Ukrainian forces exploited this, intercepted transmissions, mapped movements, guided strikes. What appeared powerful on television was fragile on the ground. Losses mounted. But inside Moscow, those losses were diluted. Reports were filtered, numbers adjusted, language softened. Failure became repositioning. Retreat became regrouping. Defeat became temporary difficulty. This distortion protected leaders from accountability, but it destroyed adaptability. Because adaptation requires honesty. As the war dragged on, Russia entered strategic limbo. It had committed too much to withdraw. It had achieved too little to declare victory. It could not easily change course, so it doubled down. Mobilization expanded manpower, but diluted quality. Training shortened. Equipment shortages grew. Morale weakened. Families protested. Young men fled. Confidence eroded. The state responded with repression. Information controls tightened. Criticism criminalized. Media restricted. Fear replaced persuasion. This preserved surface stability, but it deepened internal brittleness. Meanwhile, Ukraine transformed. Western support matured into infrastructure. Weapon systems were integrated into doctrine. Training pipelines standardized. Maintenance networks expanded. Intelligence sharing intensified. Ukraine did not merely receive aid, it internalized it, it optimized it, it built hybrid capacity, combining local resilience with global technology. The battlefield changed, precision increased, coordination improved, operational tempo accelerated. Russian units were forced into defensive postures, into trenches, into fortifications, into attrition. The initiative shifted. This shift had political consequences. International confidence in Ukraine grew, support stabilized, investment increased, diplomatic standing strengthened. At the same time, Russia's global position narrowed, sanctions restricted trade, energy leverage declined, financial access shrank, technological imports collapsed, the economy survived, but it contracted in ambition, defense spending crowded out development, innovation slowed, talent emigrated, the future was postponed. This war exposed a fundamental truth. Power is not only about capacity, it is about correction. Systems that correct mistakes survive. Systems that conceal mistakes accumulate them. Russia's system concealed, Ukraine's system corrected. That difference mattered. It mattered militarily. It mattered economically. It mattered diplomatically. It mattered morally. Escalation added another layer of danger. As conventional options narrowed, nuclear rhetoric expanded, strategic signaling intensified, exercises publicized, threats implied, uncertainty cultivated. This was meant to deter deeper involvement, but it also trapped Russia in its own narrative. When survival becomes the frame, compromise becomes betrayal, retreat becomes weakness, adjustment becomes humiliation, escalation becomes tempting. Western governments responded with calibrated restraint. Aid was expanded incrementally, red lines debated, optics managed, communication channels maintained. Support was maximized without triggering direct confrontation. This balancing act prevented catastrophe, but it required constant vigilance, and vigilance is exhausting. The longer a crisis lasts, the harder it is to sustain attention. Fatigue grows, politics shift, priorities change. That is when risks multiply. This war has reshaped how the world thinks about power. It has revealed that military strength without institutional integrity is fragile. That secrecy without feedback is dangerous. That control without legitimacy is brittle. That fear without trust is unsustainable. Ukraine's endurance has not been accidental. It has been institutional. It has been cultural. It has been political. It has been social. It has been moral. Russia's struggle has not been inevitable. It has been structural. The war is not over. Its final chapter remains unwritten. But its lessons are already embedded in defense doctrines, in alliance strategies, in energy policies, in political calculations, in public consciousness. Future leaders will study this conflict. They will analyze battles. They will debate tactics. They will argue about diplomacy, but they will also confront a simpler reality, that power loses its edge when it stops listening. That certainty becomes weakness when it blocks correction. That systems collapse not because they lack strength, but because they lack truth. This war began in confidence. It continues in complexity, and it will end someday as a case study in how misjudgment spreads through institutions until it reshapes the world. We turn away from generals and maps, away from speeches and statistics, away from strategies and doctrines, and toward the people who live inside those strategies. Because every war is ultimately measured not in territory, but in human lives. And in Ukraine, those lives have been reshaped permanently. War does not arrive as a single moment. It arrives in stages. First, there are rumors, then warnings, then sirens, then explosions, then absence of electricity, absence of water, absence of safety, absence of certainty. For millions of Ukrainians, normal life ended not with a declaration, but with a sound, the sound of missiles, artillery, and aircraft cutting across the sky. Families woke in darkness. Parents carried children into hallways. Neighbors gathered in basements. Phones lit up with messages asking a single question: are you alive? Cities that had once been ordinary became landscapes of survival. Apartment buildings collapsed. Hospitals were damaged. Schools turned into shelters. Subway stations became dormitories. Parks became cemeteries. Daily routines were replaced by emergency calculations. Where is the nearest shelter? How much water is left? Is there electricity tonight? Can we cook? Can we charge phones? Can we sleep? War compresses life into logistics. Psychologically, this transformation is devastating. Trauma does not require constant explosions. It requires uncertainty. It requires unpredictability. It requires the knowledge that safety can vanish at any moment. For children, this is especially destructive. School days were interrupted by air raid sirens. Lessons moved online, then offline, then into bunkers. Drawings shifted from houses and flowers to tanks and fire. Teachers became counselors. Parents became protectors without protection. Many children learned to distinguish weapons by sound. That is not resilience. That is adaptation to danger. Millions were displaced. Some fled abroad. Others moved within Ukraine. Entire communities emptied. Homes were left unlocked, pets were abandoned, photographs were carried instead of furniture, identity became portable, refugees arrived in foreign cities with nothing but documents and memories. They learned new languages, new systems, new routines, while carrying invisible wounds. Those who stayed faced constant loss, friends killed, neighbors missing, relatives at the front, messages unanswered, phones silent, funerals delayed, grief postponed. War does not allow mourning, it interrupts it. Healthcare systems adapted under pressure. Doctors operated during blackouts. Surgeries were performed by flashlight. Ambulances navigated damaged roads. Medical staff worked without rest. Burnout became epidemic. Psychological care was overwhelmed. Trauma outpaced treatment. Many civilians developed symptoms of post-traumatic stress, insomnia, anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, survivor's guilt. These are not temporary reactions. They are long-term injuries. Infrastructure attacks deepened suffering. Power grids targeted, heating systems damaged, water supplies disrupted. Winter became a weapon. Families lived in freezing apartments, cooked on candles, slept in coats, wrapped children in layers. Darkness became routine. Yet even in darkness, systems functioned. Utility workers repaired lines under fire. Engineers rebuilt substations. Volunteers delivered generators. Communities organized warming centers. Resilience became institutional. Cultural life persisted. Artists performed in shelters. Libraries reopened. Museums protected collections. Theaters staged plays for displaced children. Music continued. Literature continued. Memory continued. This was not escapism. It was resistance, because culture asserts continuity. It says, we still exist. Journalists documented destruction. Photographers preserved evidence. Archivists stored testimonies. Lawyers collected data. War crimes were recorded in real time. Truth became a form of defense. Women carried disproportionate burdens, managing households, protecting children, caring for elders, volunteering, working, grieving. Many became heads of families overnight. Gender roles shifted under necessity. Strength was redistributed. Elderly citizens faced isolation, mobility limited, resources scarce. Many refused to leave ancestral homes. They endured bombardment alone, clinging to memory, to place, to identity. The social fabric stretched, but it did not break. Communities created mutual aid networks, food distribution, medicine delivery, shelter coordination, information sharing. Trust replaced bureaucracy. Solidarity replaced hierarchy. This horizontal organization became a survival mechanism. Faith institutions adapted. Churches and mosques became shelters. Clergy became counselors. Rituals provided structure. Meaning was preserved. Death was acknowledged. Hope was sustained. The war also reshaped language. New words emerged, new metaphors, new silences. People learned to speak around loss, to reference absent friends, to mention destroyed streets, to navigate conversations carefully. Everyday speech carried history. Long-term consequences are only beginning to emerge. A generation growing up under sirens, families fragmented by displacement, communities altered by loss, trust reshaped by shared suffering. These effects will last decades. Reconstruction will require more than buildings. It will require healing, mental health systems, educational reform, social reconciliation, historical reckoning. Ukraine is already preparing. Psychological services expanded. Veteran support networks built, trauma-informed education introduced, community centers rebuilt, civil society mobilized. The goal is not to erase pain, it is to integrate it, to prevent it from destroying the future. Perhaps the most remarkable element is this: despite everything, Ukrainian society continues to function. Elections are planned, Courts operate, universities teach, businesses reopen, marriages happen, children are born, life insists. That insistence is strategic because it denies the aggressor total victory. It refuses annihilation. It asserts normalcy under abnormal conditions. War aims to reduce people to victims. Ukraine has resisted that reduction. Civilians are not passive casualties. They are active participants in survival. They organize, they document, they rebuild, they remember, and they continue. This war has inflicted immeasurable harm. No narrative can contain it. No statistics can summarize it, but it has also revealed extraordinary capacity for empathy, for cooperation, for courage, for dignity.